Good evening. I just ask that you please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance led by Commandant Rocky Paduano, and then remain standing after that for the singing of the national anthem and the invocation.
Detail, present arms. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet waved o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Detail, order, arms. Retire the colors.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. This 20th anniversary of 9/11, I pray, can be a time of renewal in our beautiful country, the United States of America, and strengthen us all in a difficult life we face today. 20 years ago, we came together across religious, political, social, and ethnic divides to stand as one people to heal wounds and defend against terrorism. As we face today's challenges of viruses and diseases, loss of loved ones, unemployment, families struggling, divisions in our country, and the continuing dangers of war and terrorism, I ask you to summit the 9/11 spirit of unity to confront our challenges. Let us pray that the lasting legacy of 9/11 is not fear, but rather for hope and a country renewed. In remembering the faithful events of 9/11, 2001, may each of us resolve to put aside our differences and join together in the task of renewing our nation and world, fashioned in the peace and justice of God, our Creator. So let us pray. O God of love, compassion, mercy, and healing, look on us, your people, of many different faiths and traditions, who gather here today to remember and honor all of our loved ones who perished when true evil showed its ugly face, with scenes of incredible violence and pain. God of understanding, overwhelmed by the magnitude of this tragedy, we seek your light and guidance as we continue to confront evil every day in our neighborhoods, towns, cities, country, and the world. Grant that those whose lives were spared that horrific day, may live so that the lives lost may not have been lost in vain. For those brave souls who have died since 9/11 of related illnesses, let us pray for them and their families, honoring their sacrifices and supporting their families who continue to suffer without them. For all those suffering from 9/11 related illnesses and its effect, may we as a country never forget how they cared for every one of God's children. Let us show our care for each of you and the sacrifices that you and your families live with each and every day. Finally, Father, comfort and console us, strengthen us in hope, and give us the wisdom and courage to work tirelessly for a better world where true peace and love reigns among nations and in the hearts of all. Amen.
Good evening, everyone. It is good to be together. My name is Justin Varghese, and I serve as the Vice President of the Commack Board of Education, and I'd like to welcome everyone to the 9/11 Night of Reflection. It is truly an honor to be together today, a day that even 20 years later remains difficult, but at the same time also illuminates the love and solidarity in the heart of our Commack community and our nation as a whole. We're here because we will never forget the thousands of beautiful lives taken from us on September 11, 2001. We come together today to honor the courage of those who put themselves in harm's way to save people they never knew. We come together today with hearts full of gratitude for the strength that has bolstered us over these last 20 years. I often think of how on 9/11, the worst of humanity met the best of humanity as our real-life heroes, our firefighters, our police officers, and other first responders, many of whom are here with us tonight, ran into a fire to rescue those in need. They ran into the fire, risking their own lives for the common good. These are truly our heroes. And I know 20 years seems like a long time, but for many of us, especially the families who have lost loved ones that day, I'd imagine it can seem like it was just yesterday. And we are mindful that nothing can ever truly erase the pain and heartache over that profound loss. But our sacred task as a community today is to carry forward the legacy of the heroes who made the ultimate sacrifice for us. Because this day also serves as a moment in time in which we renew the love, the faith, and unity that binds us together as one American family. On that day, our nation was wholly united, united in shock, united in grief, and also united in resolve. And it reminds us today that community is a force that can withstand any hardship when we do it together. So this is the spirit of love and sacrifice and unity that makes us a great nation, and that very spirit rings true here in our Commack community. This is a day in which we are reminded that we are a community marked by care for one another that transcends our differences and transcends our disagreements, that we are far more united than we are divided. So as we take steps toward one another in unity as a community and as a nation, we remember and we honor those who have gone before us. And it is truly an honor for us to be able to do so together this evening. So with that, I'd like for us to continue with our program, and I'd like to introduce and call upon the superintendent of our school district, Dr. Donald James, to say a few words.
Good evening, everyone. So I want to thank you for attending our 20th, yes, this is our 20th annual 9/11 Remembrance Ceremony. So nearly everyone here remembers where they were that fateful September morning. The destruction and lives lost are indelibly etched into our collective memories. We lost thousands of innocent lives that day. We also know that countless heroes were born. As mentioned, first responders, firefighters, police officers, EMS, transit workers, as well as other everyday selfless citizens who put their own lives in peril to save others. The brave men and women who participated in the search and recovery efforts that went on for months. Some of those people are here tonight. Tonight, we're going to pay tribute to many Commack residents who lost their lives that day and in the weeks and months and years that followed. We're also going to share the stories of some of those individuals and others from that day. You see, our stories are what connects us to one another. And tonight, we want to connect you to those that lived their lives for others. Mother Teresa said, "A life not lived for others is not a life." Each of these people did just that. They lived their lives for others, for their families, for their fellow citizens, for those lost on 9/11, for those who lost loved ones on 9/11. These were courageous individuals who lived their lives for others. Now, something else that most of us remember, and it was mentioned before, is the way the country came together that day and the days and months that followed. People volunteered to help families who were suffering from loss. Others donated thousands in supplies and goods and money, everything going down to ground zero workers or other families in need, while others simply showed their patriotism and compassion to others through small acts of kindness. But those small acts reverberated and played forward everywhere. I know our theme tonight is to remember the stories of those who were lost and those that gave their lives. Another theme is our effort to bring back a sense of togetherness during this time of stress in our country. Folks, for those who care to, I implore you to be kind to one another, even when you don't agree. I appeal to you to listen to understand another's perspective, even if your perspective is different. Develop common understanding. As through common understanding, perhaps we as a community, a state, a nation can unite to show our children that even when things are different and difficult and there are disagreements, we can be kind to one another. We can be kind to one another and fill our hearts with kindness as we are tonight, sitting here. Everyone has kindness in their heart tonight. And I want to see that continue. And if we move forward with that in our hearts, we will be better, and our children will see a better community. Thank you, and may God bless you and everyone you care about.
Thank you, Dr. James. I'd like to just take a moment to thank and acknowledge some of our attendees this evening. As we just heard from Dr. James, we're grateful for his presence here, as well as our Board of Education, our Board President, Steve Hartman, the Board Trustees, William Hender, Susan Hermer, and Gus Huber. We're grateful for our school administrators who are here, for Senator Mario Matera, for Assemblyman Keith Brown, for the Suffolk County Comptroller, John Kennedy, for the Huntington Supervisor, Chad Lubinacci, for Smithtown Supervisor, Edward Werheim, Legislator Susan Berland, Legislator Leslie Kennedy, Legislator Robert Trotta, Councilwoman Joan Zergel, Councilwoman Eugene Cook, Councilman Mark Cuthbertson, Councilman Thomas Lohman, Councilman Edmund Smythe. And on behalf of the District Attorney, Tim Sinney, Mr. John Barry, who is Chief Investigator and Chief of the Commack Fire Department, is with us. Army Sergeant Justin Martinez, Marine Sergeant Lexus Martinez, Marine Corps League Detachment number 792, the Commack Fire Department, Commack Ambulance Corps, Rabbi Mendel Teldin, Deacon Louis Anatrella, Alan Orloff, Chris Toomey, Mike Malloy, the Sinkay family and New York Entertainment, and our high school student, Dara Gordon, who sang the national anthem for us. Let's give them all a round of applause. And I'd like to introduce Jim Ryder to come share a few words with us.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here this evening. Let me get the politics out of the way. The Feel Good Foundation is fighting in Congress right now, once again, as we've been fighting for 20 years for the responders. We need more money. $2.5 billion is needed for the heroes. The Feel Good Foundation just doesn't have that much money. We may have $250, but that's a start. We fill refrigerators, we pay for funerals, we do what we can, and we go to Congress and we fight. And we've had some arguments, some good, healthy, safe debate, respectful debate with some of the people standing behind me and sitting behind me today. I used to use the phrase to all the members of Congress and Senate, tear down this wall between politics and patriotism and pass this bill. So here we are saying that yet again. We've run out of money. There's plenty of people to blame for that. Wasn't us. We're the recipients of the money. Other people decided how much money we're going to get. They're politicians who work for you, who are paid by you, and you need to call them and let them know we need money. I'd like to end that with a joke, but I don't have one. But the politics is over. There was a 9/11 responder who was retiring, what we used to call in the Marine Corps the seabag drag. It takes about 2 days to retire from the NYPD, and you finish it all by taking your shield off and putting on this beautiful little pillow that congratulates you, and you're done. And sadly, it kills me that after 20 years, I've forgotten his name. I've told that story, or this story, 100 times if I told it once. When he put his shield on that pillow, he's done. The only thing left is the police commissioner's signature. But you know that tradition. And that pillow's placed there at that strategic spot to say thank you to you. And the first plane hit. And headquarters became chaotic. And officers were dying to go down there, and they were directed to wait for the buddy system, groups of 5. Nobody knew if we were under war or under attack. All they knew is there was a great deal of help needed, and they wanted to be that help. Incredible people. So he tried his best to find out what was going on. He stepped into that room where he's supposed to stay out of, where the paperwork is for his retirement, access to a lot of sensitive information. And they turned on a TV that was in there, and they started to watch. And they watched the second plane hit. He picked up his shield off of that pillow. Went down to ground zero. An incredible gesture for his country, and never came back. One of millions of stories that I've heard, with the pleasure that I have with the federal grant to motivate responders to join the World Trade Center Help Program. And now, today, I just came to realize, my in-laws are here, so they'll be finding out themselves. Andrew and young Philip are eligible for the World Trade Center Help Program. My family, my own family, I had no idea. There are many who have not joined that should. The World Trade Center HELP program doesn't have some kind of expiration coming up. I won't comment any further on that. I'll be polite. But it doesn't. So don't listen to others. Call me, call the Feel Good Foundation, and we'll give you the accurate truth, and we'll register you with the World Trade Center HELP program. If you were standing on a corner like two people from the Outback restaurant here in Commack 20 years ago, you are eligible because you are handing out food to the responders. Handing out boots because the ground was so hot their shoes were melting. So they needed new boots, and volunteers were doing that. Those people are eligible because they're sick and dying because of their patriotism. Somebody standing up here before me mentioned patriotism. There was a lot of it that day. There's a lot of patriots here this evening, and there will always be patriots. The drug users who hated law enforcement for obvious reasons, and we knew who they were, and they knew who we were. They made primitive cardboard box signs saying, "Thank you, NYPD." And they stood on the West Side Highway where we all access Ground Zero, and they held up those signs. It was very touching. We're not naive. We knew it wasn't going to last, but it was nice while it was there. Patriotism, dedication to this country. I don't see the divisiveness that's so commonly spoken about by so many. I don't see it. I see people that call for help and I give it to them. I see people that seek me out and thank me. I see people that call my home when they see our commercial and say, "Hey, Jim, I saw you on TV." I see goodness in people because it's there. I don't see like I used to, but I can hear it in their voice. This is a good country, the damn best. And we need to remember that we are all here for each other. Do not let anybody tell you otherwise. To the children, the students, the young people, the college students, people who stand in this awesome school, being taught by incredible teachers. It is your future, it is not ours. Billy Joel has a song called 2,000 Years. It's incredible. I don't know how it didn't get better or more recognition as a song about the Y2K. But I still listen to it to this day because it talks about this country in an admirable way. It's politics that caused us to go down to DC as many times as we did, but that's okay. Because in the end, we moved the mountain, we got it done, and there is help for you. Please, to the students of Commack High School, Commack Middle School, the entire Commack school system, it's your future. Don't screw it up. And be kind to each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. At this time, I'd like to introduce and call up our own Vice Principal of the high school, Mr. Matt Keltos.
Good evening, and thank you everybody for coming down to see us tonight. 9/11 is a day that will forever be etched in the minds of everyone who lived through it. It is a day those closest to the event remember day after day. Every year for the past 20, the Commack community has paid tribute to the people who were lost, as well as the first responders who sacrificed their safety for others and ran towards danger. Our community has come together year after year unlike no other. Together, we built a memorial. We planted survivor trees in honor of those we lost. We brought in the Stephen Siller Tunnel to Towers 9/11 Never Forget mobile exhibit this past Independence Day. The survivor trees are in honor of those who lost their lives to post-9/11 illnesses. The memorial, dedicated September 11, 2012, holds steel that would have supported stairs at one of the towers. To us, it symbolizes a stairway to heaven. Our own high school students created the words engraved on the stone base. This memorial honors the bravery and sacrifice of our everyday heroes and represents the determination of our community to never forget. Alongside the memorial are over 500 engraved pavers which exemplify the remembrance message of the memorial. The World Trade Center, the epicenter of the attacks in New York, epitomized the economic strength and cultural diversity of New York City. The two towers were a city unto itself where people beautifully coexisted regardless of race, heritage, culture, language, or religion. That legacy was shattered on 9/11 for everyone in New York and in the Commack community. The following are recollections, memories, and histories of our community members of 9/11 and the days, weeks, and years after. Our first impressions come from our 2001 school-age students who lost their innocence because of these terrorist attacks. The first will be shared by Dakota Spiel and Ava Mahoney.
September 10, 2001. Another ordinary day for my 11-year-old self. School, homework, practice, softball, and work on my sketches so that one day I could be a fashion designer. That night before dinner, my dad and I had a catch on the front lawn. We would throw the ball often while catching up on each other's day. That day, he told me that tomorrow he had a meeting in the Twin Towers. He knew how much I loved the sight of the Twin Towers and the Empire State Building every time we went into New York City. He did not work in the Twin Towers. He just happened to have a meeting in the building that morning. That night, we had dinner together as a family. Life was good in Commack, New York. September 11, 2001. That morning I went to school. I just started the 6th grade as a student in Commack Middle School. I walked into my English class and was catching up with my best friend, Vicky.
9 a.m., the classroom phone rings. One of the students had been called out of the class to go home. His parents were coming to pick him up. You could tell it was unexpected and he wasn't sure why he was getting picked up. We all sighed at how lucky he was to be getting out of class. About a minute later, the phone rings again. Another student was being called down to go home. Again and again and again, throughout the day, about 15 students were pulled from the class with parents picking them up out of school, and not one of them was expecting to be picked up and didn't know why. We knew something wasn't right. This was not normal, but we had absolutely no idea why. 9th period, I go to science class. We all sit down as the bell rings to start class when the principal gets on the announcement system and starts addressing what is left of her students. She covered the timeline of events that occurred, and that at 10:28, the North Tower had collapsed. My heart sank to the bottom of my body as I ran out of the classroom to the bathroom, knowing that my dad was in the World Trade Center. As the day ended, I walked out of school praying that my family was there to pick me up like they always do. My dad was there. Both of my parents came to pick me up from school that day. I ran into his arms crying, thanking God that I still had my dad. On the car ride home, my dad explained to me what was going on and that he was on the Brooklyn Bridge when it happened. During that car ride home at 11 years old, with the dreams of being a fashion designer, I told my dad that I was going to join the military. My dad returned to Ground Zero multiple times in the week following to assist as a civilian first responder with his prior mining experience and equipment to do whatever he could to help find people buried in the rubble. I remember him coming home covered in gray soot and putting all of his clothes into a bag outside as my mom helped him clean off. Life as we knew it would never be the same. Michelle Mudge, Commack High School class of 2008.
Mudge, as she was affectionately known, was merely a sixth grade student, and the course of her life was changed forever, as was that of Michael Porfidio, a fifth grader, and a CHS class of '09 graduate, which is presented by Jack Marr.
I woke up, ate breakfast, and walked to school. I had just started fifth grade. I remember the principal walking into my class and pulling my teacher to the side as she started to cry. The next thing I remember was getting told that myself and my little sister were being picked up at school by my aunt. As I walked to the office, I could see that there were a lot of kids being pulled out early and that people working in the office were very upset. We eventually got back to my aunt's house, and she had the news on, like I'm sure everyone else in the country had at that time to watch. We saw the first World Trade Center with a huge hole on fire. As we were watching more and more of my aunt, we see the second tower get hit. I remember we had gotten a phone call right after that from my dad. At the time, my father was a 10-year veteran of the NYPD in Manhattan. It was a phone call that I would have not and will never ever forget. He told me that he loved me and my sister, and that he had to go and try and help people that were hurt. I remember crying and begging him not to go, but it was too late as he was already in the city. Hours later, my aunt and my uncle took me and my sister out in their boat as we went to the Hudson River. The whole city was covered in smoke, and I knew my father was in there somewhere. Luckily, he came home 3 days later. We were excited to get to talk to him, but I remember he sounded very depressed. I remember asking my dad who did this, and his reply was that they were bad guys who wanted to hurt Americans. From that point, I decided what I was going to do when I got older.
Our first responders put everything aside to be there for the people of New York City. The Commack Fire Department and Commack Ambulance Corps mustered what they could, with ambulances set to Shea Stadium, hopefully to evacuate the injured. That unfortunately never happened. In the words of Ed Monahan of the Commack Fire Department, on the morning of 9/11, I had just finished working a 24-hour tour at Special Operations FDNY. I was talking to Chief John Moran and realized I had to get home. I said goodbye to John, and little did I know that those would be the last words I would ever speak to him. Within the next hour and a half, FDNY Special Ops would lose over 100 of its firefighters in the collapse of the towers. I offered the services of Commack Fire Rescue, and with the help of Chief John Engberg, we delivered a rescue truck and 6 well-trained firefighters. We were the first outside rescue team at the scene around 1 p.m. They spent countless hours conducting search operations. Chief Engberg also provided a ladder truck that was sent to Jamaica to provide support for the city. That night, there were 2 structure fires in New York City, one in the Bronx and one in Jamaica. Ladder Company 1 was the first on the scene. The Commack Department rescue responders, Joe Valvana, Joe DeJose, Kieran Keene, Dave Pendola, Frank Caputo, and Bill Week. The Ladder Company responders, Angelo Sanziri, Bob Jinks Sr., Vincent Zuppo, Bud Connolly, Jack Raycraft, Bob Murtaugh, and Joe Badamo, who sadly lost a battle with a World Trade Center illness less than 2 years after, and was the first Commack firefighter to die in the line of duty. Stephen Gowhan delivers the recollection of the days of James Rodder, United States Marine Corps, NYPD, retired.
On the morning of September 11th, I was woken by a call by my sister. She was informing me that the first tower had been hit. My wife and I put on the TV and watched as they reported the second tower being hit. Life for me at 38 years old, with 16 years on the NYPD, had changed forever. I listened to reports that all members of the NYPD were being ordered into work. The news, not my boss, was telling me to go to work. It reported that approximately 78 NYPD officers were missing, and that number could go higher. As powerful a statement as that was, I was not deterred. I was like a man rushing to on a trip, going over 101 things in my head and with my wife. She was 3 months pregnant with twins, and she had 3-year-old twins to take care of. I was leaving her with absolutely no idea of what I was going to do, and absolutely no idea when I would be coming home. By the time I got to downtown Manhattan, it was nighttime, but that really didn't make much of a difference. The smoke over most of lower Manhattan and parts of Brooklyn was so thick the sun could not penetrate it. I remember hearing jets overhead, but couldn't see them. I remember a smell that I got to know all too well over the next 4 years. And more impactful than all of this was the silence. Amidst all the chaos were some brilliant people. People and machines who were doing what they could for many hours already. They all had this understanding that I was not aware of yet. As I approached the east side of Ground Zero, near many buildings, 20 stories and higher, I was unaware the building I was now standing next to appeared to be next to class. At that moment, I started to hear whistles blowing, then horns, and then those powerful horns that large construction vehicles and trucks have, all sounding off, and everyone was running right toward me, and then past me. Those horns were telling me and everyone they had reasons to believe the building was going to collapse right then and there. I realized this myself, and thought, where do I go? If I ran west, I'd fall right into the pit of Ground Zero. If I ran south, I'd be running into everyone else. The building that was soon to fall, though it never did, was to my east, and I finally realized I should just follow everyone else and run north. I did all for naught, but it still put fear into me. This happened again in a few weeks, when I was down in the pit and I heard the whistles again. But this time, it was not for fear of another building collapse. It was because someone thought they heard a person calling for help from inside a void in the pile. Again, the whistles became horns, horn beats became louder horns, and then suddenly what sounded like an incredibly loud air raid siren, then silence. All trucks were turned off. Responders stopped moving, generators were turned off, and everyone listened. I could hear a man calling for help. He was a rescue person who fell into a void and was stuck about 1 story below. Once it was realized he was okay, the noise started again. That silence stays with me, and to this day, I call it the loudest silence I have ever heard. On day 8, I was transferred to the command known as the NYPD think tank, Commack. It was tasked with creating the NYPD DNA database that was to be used to identify bodies and body parts. It was later used for many other things as well, like identifying false claims and identifying found property. I met Detective Tom Neal, a fellow Commack resident, for the first time upon arriving at OMAP. He too was transferred to OMAP to create this database. It was me, Tom, and our Lieutenant Andy Costello. The 3 of us became very close. Tom and I worked on this DNA database for many years. We were exposed to the soot of Ground Zero for those 4 years as we cleaned the various items before returning them to family. We did this in the poorly ventilated basement of Police HQ built over 50 years ago. We were always talking about more and more friends being diagnosed with cancer, never considering our own mortality until just a few years later. Cancer took Tom's life in 2021. The part of my life was taken from me by an unfair, violent disease. My service in the United States Marine Corps was during the Cold War, and I don't know war as it is defined, but I know 9/11. I know Ground Zero. I knew the many, many appreciative people we returned a wedding ring to, and I know cancer. I dare say I know what those who come home from war think, there but for the grace of God. I've been a staunch advocate for the heroes of 9/11 and was intimately involved in the battle to get the James DeGroga Act passed in 2010. I gladly left my family numerous times to travel to D.C. with John Field and others to stump the halls of Congress and the Senate, and to tell them my story and the story of Detective Tom Neal. In 2020, a woman called the Feel Good Foundation. She lost her husband on 9/11 and wanted to raise funds for our foundation. She told me how she was lucky to talk to her husband that morning as rescuers tried to get him on the 91st floor. He didn't make it out. The NYPD had called her some years later and returned her husband's credit card, all that was found of him. I keep a copy of the DNA database on my phone, and while she chatted about her husband, I searched. I came to realize it was me who had given her that credit card in 2003. To be sitting there in Commack Starbucks with this same woman over 15 years later was very emotional. It was incredibly emotional for both of us. Very emotional for a lot of different reasons. I do wish I could tell Tom that story, and maybe someday I'll get that chance. For the last 6 years, I have been recipient of the federal contract to educate responders about the James Grove Law, and it gives me an opportunity to say out loud what I experienced at Ground Zero, which is an excellent form of therapy. It gives me an opportunity to talk about my hero, Tom Neal, and it also gives me a chance to hear all the stories of responders shared with me. Some 90% of responders suffer with some level of PTSD. I am one of that 90%. I love my country, and I love my fellow responders, and I urge you to find one of them, if not 100 of them, and thank them for what they did, and pledge your support to them during this and every anniversary of that horrific day.
John Reina shares the memories of another first responder.
I was home when it started. I had just put my 5-year-old daughter Emily on the bus for school, and my wife Sue dropped my 1-year-old son Joey off at my mother-in-law's for the day. My wife called me and asked if I was watching TV. I said no. And she said, "Oh, you didn't know? A plane crashed into the World Trade Center." She knew that I was at the first World Trade Center bombing in 1993 in the Emergency Service Unit. So I turned on the news, and like everyone else that morning, was shocked at the fire coming from the tower. Knowing that this would be a huge job, I got my go bag together, and as I was getting ready to leave, I watched the second plane strike the World Trade Center. In that second, I knew, we all knew, that we were under attack, and that this would be an all-hands-on deck. The drive from my home in Commack to Fort Totten usually takes about 35 to 45 minutes. I made it in about 20 minutes. Cars that pulled off the road to let first responders drive like crazy to get into the city. As I was driving in, I was listening to 1010 Winds News Radio, describing when the tower collapsed. I'll never forget the female reporter's lines, "Oh my God, the tower just fell." We loaded up the 18 trucks and headed into Manhattan. We figured we'd never get into Manhattan through the tunnel, so we went north and crossed the Throgs Neck Bridge. As we were crossing the bridge, the second tower came down. We continued through the Bronx and crossed the Triborough Bridge and took the Harlem River Drive to the FDR Drive and headed south. As we traveled south towards the Staten Island Ferry Terminal, we could see the giant smoke plume from where the towers used to be. There were thousands of people going north on the other side of the FDR, walking in the street like a stream of refugees. When we entered the small tunnel near the Staten Island Ferry, it was a beautiful, bright, sunny day. When we came out on the other side, it was like a bad movie about the end of the world. Dust so thick you could only see about 10 feet. The debris on the ground was like black soot, several feet deep. We drove as far as we could before we couldn't go any further. Vehicles were burning out of control. Fire department, police department, and civilian cars all aflame. As we got closer to the site, there were no more roads visible. We continued on foot into the site. The destruction was complete, biblical in its proportion. Fire and police vehicles that weighed 40 tons were ripped apart and crushed like aluminum beer cans. Communications were down. The repeaters for both the fire department, police department, and other emergency units were in the towers, which were now destroyed. Next to how walkie-talkie phones were, so we were able to hook up with some other units to make small teams and begin to look for victims and help where we could. The unsung heroes of this entire event were union workers. Without them, we would not have been able to do anything in those first few days. Heavy construction equipment that was needed to begin rescue operations miraculously showed up. They were moving debris out of the way for us within hours. As we found our newly formed temporary headquarters and let them know who was still alive, we began to get a sense of the destruction and what horrors awaited us. We knew we had lost people, we just didn't know how many. There was one point during the day, I just saw a list of missing and confirmed dead. There was no doubt this was a wartime event. One of our emergency service guys was literally blown out the front door of the North Tower when it collapsed, and he told us that 2 of our guys were right behind him. Mike Curtin and John D'Alara knew these guys, came into the unit in 1987 with John. Mike and I had rappelled onto the roof of the World Trade Center in 1993 when the first attempt was made to destroy the buildings. 5 of us decided to go looking for them. Steve Hayden, Mike Warmoth, Pete Segretti, Jose Hernandez, and I made our way to what was left of the North Tower, climbing over a pile that is hard to describe. We were crawling over the top of what we thought was an escalator, but it was the elevator engine room on the 110th floor. We saw handprints where people had dragged their hands along the wall, looking for a way out. At one point, we found a void into what was left of the parking garage under the towers. We began to crawl into it, and suddenly the fire department started hitting their air horns 3 times in a row, which means the building is collapsing. We didn't know which building was coming down, but we knew we had to get the hell out of there right now. Pete and Jose were in the void, and Steve was coming up and out. I told them to get out, and that I would wait for Pete and Jose. They looked at me like I was nuts, and Big Steve said, "No, we are all getting out together. We all die here together. Steve and Mike are Marines, and don't leave people behind." We got Pete and Jose out and began to run, just as building number 7 was collapsing. We didn't look back, we didn't hear it, we felt it in our souls, pushing us down the block as we made a turn to Stuyvesant High School. The blast flew by us. Miraculously, no one was killed when number 7 collapsed. This is just one story out of a 9-month ordeal that thousands of first responders were part of. There were thousands of acts of heroism that will never be recorded or acknowledged. I know that the actions of Steve and Mike, along with Pete and Jose, will be with me forever. I will say this, it was one of the few times in my career that I was truly frightened. Anyone who says anything different either wasn't there or is full of shit. We were scared, but we went anyway. It's who we are, it's what we do. I remember finally getting through to my wife and having to tell her that 2 of the guys that were at our wedding were killed, and that I wasn't sure about anything. Seeing armed fighters flying low over Manhattan, we did know this was our Pearl. We did know this was our Pearl Harbor. The ensuing weeks and months on the pile and in the pit at Ground Zero have had a lasting effect on me. Of all the events I've been involved in, whatever the role, the event will be a defining moment not only in the national memory, but certainly in mine and my family's for generations to come. Joe Zogby, New York Police Department, Emergency Service Unit, retired.
Class of 2006 presents the story from her dad that has been difficult for him to express over the years since 9/11.
20 years ago today, my father, Richie McMahon, was finishing his tour to go home. When the second plane hit, the call came in that they were to report down in Manhattan. My dad was asked to be the 5th man in the engine, and without hesitation, he took the job. At this time, both planes had already crashed into each of the towers. On his way down, he was anxious, ready to go help save lives. But when he arrived at the West Side Highway Command Center, he saw the devastation that surrounded him, and his reality sunk in quickly. He knew he was marching into a job that he might never come out of. My dad didn't know what impact he would really have on such a huge job, but all he could think about was to do anything to save someone. He received his order to go to the South Tower. As he crossed the West Side Highway, the blast from the first collapse knocked him off his feet and under a pile of debris. Catching his breath and freeing himself from the rubble, he was on his hands and knees, unable to see and incoherent from the blast. Not understanding where he was, what he was breathing in, or what was happening to him, he finally got to his feet and realized he was alive and able to help. Alone and separated from his group, all he heard were the car alarms and firefighter pass alarms. Everything else was eerily quiet. It just looked like a snowstorm blasted through Manhattan while white debris was falling from the sky. My dad, being the man he is, and the person I call my hero, turned around and continued to run back and forth in the debris, directing people to safety, when all of a sudden he heard another loud roar, and he knew it was the second tower collapsing. He turned and ran for cover, once again being surrounded by rubble. My dad was admitted into Jersey Hospital. Hours later, when he was released, he took a bus with fellow firemen back to his firehouse where they brought many civilians. From there, he still acted like a hero and drove each of those civilians home to safety. Immediately the next day, my dad, like many others, dug through the rubble at ground zero, looking for anyone to save for months at a time. In 2010, he reached out to Debbie Verga about obtaining a piece of steel. With the persistence from Debbie Verga and the ideas from my father, 2 years later, Commack was one of the first school districts to receive a piece of steel. Debbie Verga and my dad had the opportunity to travel down to the airplane hangar and bring the steel back home to their community. Now today, I get to walk around this beautiful monument with my family that this committee created, knowing my dad was a tremendous part in getting this steel home to us. Thank you.
And while these brave responders were working on the pile in a recovery effort, the Commack community worked behind the scenes to provide donations and promote healing. While at an open house at Commack Middle School a few days after 9/11, a woman, an angel, approached Debbie Verga and asked if she had any items for first responders working on the pile. Her husband was FDNY and was heading into the city in the morning. Debbie rounded up some parents and started going house to house around the middle school. People donated anything they could find to the first responders: water, toilet paper, food. The Commack community really came together that night to help out in a time of crisis. And the school community came together as Daniela Messina shares the Commack Healing Quilt fashioned by teachers Andrea Allen and Grace Barrett in 2001 and 2002, which are on display around the track.
Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world, and Mead is the only thing that ever has. This quote by Margaret Mead was to strive to create the Commack Healing Quilt Project. Born out of the tragedy of 9/11, this creation allowed participants to feel a strong sense of community and spirit as they explore their feelings in relation to the devastating events and the resultant visual memorial. Recognizing that there was a universal need to work through those difficult times and the everyday challenges that life brings us, the project started with all of Commack Middle School participating and was soon expanded to the entire community. There were over 100 panels created for the quilt, which when laid was larger than a basketball court. In 2002, some panels were brought to the Capitol in Albany and to New York City NYPD precincts so they can see and feel the support from those who they protect.
Our students also met the call, making every effort to protect our nation. As early as 2001, Sergeant Darren Boole, Commack High School class of '98, joined the Marines to defend the United States against the terrorism that touched the lives of all New Yorkers. To quote, "The United States is our country. That is our home, our house." And they came in and kicked the door in. So we are going to come back at them. I am happy to be a part of any operations here in Afghanistan. Michael Porfidio, United States Marine Corps, made good on his promise as he enlisted 8 years after 9/11. As he was standing on the yellow footprints on Parris Island, South Carolina, he recalled how he wanted to help the world get rid of the bad guys so that nothing like September 11th would happen again. In Afghanistan in 2010, he fought the Taliban, built schools, trained the police force and the army on proper weapons handling and first aid. He wanted to make the people of Afghanistan understand that we were there to help them, just like his father helped on September 11th. Michelle Mudge, also made good on her promise to protect her nation as she received an ROTC scholarship to North Dakota, and after receiving her degree, continued in the U.S. Army with the promise to never forget. Her message today reads, on this 20th anniversary of the most tragic terrorist attacks on U.S. soil, I ask that you pray for your country and pray for our soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen who continue to fight for freedom and for a better life for innocent people around the world. As President Ronald Reagan once said, freedom is never more than a generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. Justin Wilson, Commack High School class of 2004, Lance Corporal, United States Marine Corps. Justin Wilson made the ultimate sacrifice in Helmand Province, Afghanistan during Operation Enduring Freedom. On March 22, 2010, Lance Corporal Justin Wilson was killed while supporting combat operations. Lance Corporal Wilson was a talented graffiti artist and 2004 graduate of Commack High School. And while he didn't directly enlist after graduation, he was influenced by the events of 9/11 and his love of the Marine Corps in order to defend our country. While in Afghanistan, he was part of a Marine battalion that also built schools and shared candy with children. He always had a soft side that was not expected of Marines, but it duly showed his willingness to defend as well as care for his fellow men. 9/11 was one of the darkest times in our history as a nation, but our country and our community came together. We did not care about race, religion, or gender during the days after the attacks. We cared about unity, true unity, the kind that has people rally behind the flag, for real, and to be there for each other. In the words of veteran and author Graham Allen, we have forgotten that differences and division are two totally separate things. Today, we need to embrace the unity that we had on 9/12 and not just say the word. Unity is difficult. Unity takes work. Unity is what makes us the United States of America. God bless the United States, and God bless everyone here.
At this time, we're going to proceed with the wreath ceremony. I'm going to be calling the names one at a time of some of the individuals from our community that we lost on that day and in the days and weeks and years that followed. And for each one of them, a wreath will be placed in their honor. So we'll begin with Port Authority worker Ezra Aviles. Worker at the World Trade Center, Benilda Domingo. FDNY hazmat firefighter Dennis Scalzo. Investment banker with Sandler O'Neill and Partners, James Munholm. Stockbroker with Cantor Fitzgerald, Joseph A. Kelly. Stock trader for Fred Alger, John T. Schroeder. NYPD Detective Tracy Takchakowski. NYPD Lieutenant Marcy Sims. Dr. Michael Guttenberg. FDNY Lieutenant and Air National Guard Master Sergeant Christopher J. Raguso. Volunteer firefighter from the Commack Fire Department, Joe Badamo. At this time, a wreath will be laid for the NYPD. And a wreath will be laid for the FDNY. Let's honor and remember those that we lost. And at this time, I'd like to invite the high school select group to perform The Road Home.
Tell me where is the road I can call my home, that I lost so long ago. All these years I have wandered, oh, when will I know? There's a way, there's a road that will lead me home. Oh, after wind, after rain, when my dark is done, as I wake from a dream in the gold of day, through the air there's a calling from far away. There's a voice I can hear that will lead me home. Rise up, follow me, come away is the call, with the love in your heart, as the only song. There is no such beauty as where you belong. Rise up, follow me, I will lead you home.
Thank you for that beautiful song. At this time, I'd invite you to please stand as Alan Orloff will present the ringing of the bells, followed by a moment of silence.
Good evening. My name is Alan Orloff, a proud member of the Commack School's music education staff, now retired. Tonight, it is my honor and privilege to be allowed to ring the 9/11 memorial bell, as I have for the past 20 years since the inception of this solemn event. The memorial bell is rung 5 times. The first toll is rung for Tower 1, reminding us of 8:46 a.m. when the first plane hit the tower. The second toll is rung for Tower 2, struck at 9:03. The third toll is rung for the Pentagon, struck at 9:37 a.m. The fourth toll is rung for United Airlines Flight 93, crashed into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania at 10:03 a.m. by its brave passengers who gave their lives fighting with their terrorist captors. Their sacrifice saved the White House, which was believed to be the intended target. The fifth toll is rung to honor the police, fire, and emergency medical services departments, the Port Authority police, Port Authority workers, members of the military, and the average citizen who we know today as first responders. We honor those who died that day as heroes. those who survived and live today as heroes, and those who live as heroes while suffering from diseases caused by exposure to the terrible toxic fumes and dust during the terrible weeks following the attacks, as they worked tirelessly in the rubble of the towers in hopes of finding survivors.
Almighty and ever-powerful God, may our lives honor the lives of all who have been lost, all who have suffered in the wake of that terrible day. May we honor them with our eagerness to work for a world in which our lives are not swallowed up in violence, but in which we are set free to be the people that God means us to be. For God has not placed us here on earth to be at each other's mercy, but in each other's care. Amen.
Thank you. As we close our evening together, I do want to just take a moment to say a very special thank you to Debbie Verga and the committee and their team and the folks that put countless hours in this labor of love of putting this event together for us. So with that, I want to thank you all for coming tonight.